Hey everyone, this is Jack Bourne. I'm the founder of Deadline Funnel, and I'm here with a special guest who has some exciting news that we'll be talking about soon. I'm here with Kelly Trach. So Kelly, great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Jack. I super appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your business and your origin story, who you serve, and we'll slowly work our way towards some of the big news that you have coming up.
Yeah. So I work as a business coach and I help people find their genius and monetize it and turn it into digital businesses where they sell one-on-one services and online courses. And I always like to say that if I saw what I was doing in a crystal ball in like grade 10, I'd be like, what? I don't think I'd end up here. I was always like your typical overachiever in high school. I did all the things. I went to one of Canada's best business schools. And at the end of my time in business school, I had two job offers. I wasn't stoked about either one of them. And I was like, well, what have I always wanted to do that I could do now? I'm young. So I was like, let me move to San Francisco and try building a tech startup. I got into a fancy pre-accelerator program and startup one failed. And I was like, that's fine. Let me try again. Startup two failed. And then I had startup three that also failed. And I kind of had this aha moment. I was taking a week-long vacation back to Canada. And I was in this cabin in the middle of the woods and kind of nowhere where the Wi-Fi is not good. And I had this intuitive thought just sort of pop in my brain. And it was just, what if you just did what you were good at? Like, what if you just leaned into the things that you were naturally good at and tried to build a business around that? And that question really caught me off guard because it was never something I had ever considered before. And I was always pushing myself to do the hardest, craziest challenges and go for these big things and really push myself. And I thought, well, that's not really working because these startups are failing. So what if I lean into what's easy and what's natural to me? And then it sort of brought up the question of like, what are those things for me? Because I don't even know. And I kind of indirectly stumbled upon figuring out my gifts and what I was good at. And at the time, my business has taken many pivots, but at the time it was a little kind of a health blog. And that kind of had turned more into mindset coaching, life coaching stuff. And then people started saying, well, hey, Kelly, you have a established business and a website and coaching packages and online courses and a podcast. You have customers. Can you show me how to do this? And I thought, oh, no, like you don't want my help. Like I have all these failed startups. And I was like, okay, I'll try once. I'll do business coaching for one client. And then kind of the rest was history. And that's sort of the thing that people kept coming to me for and the thing that I was naturally good at. And it was easy for me and I had experience. And it was one of those things that it taken me time to get there. But yeah, I ended up landing on business coaching and I've been doing that for the last 3 years full time as a business coach, helping people find their genius and monetize it and turn what they can only uniquely do into a business model. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
That's amazing. I'm really impressed, and I want to give you a big kudos about not giving up on your overall dream. Like you had these several failed businesses. A lot of people would have quit there, and you persisted on. Can you talk about a little bit of what were some of the things that maybe come natural to you, but might have stopped other people? Like, is there anything mindset wise that you teach other people that you might have learned in going through that process?
Mm. I had a mentor in that pre-accelerator program that had said, the faster you go through 100 ideas, the faster you get to $1 billion. And I always thought about that being so fascinating through like this concept of if you just kind of keep going through things and you keep going through ideas, like you're going to hit one. And it's okay. Almost like normalizing that process of failure and being okay with sometimes that uncertainty. That was always a phrase that really stuck with me.
Yeah. Let's talk about the people that you currently now
Mm-hmm.
serve and helping them to turn their genius into. I would imagine it's oftentimes a personal brand. Is there a certain niche that you find a lot of your clients are in, or is it all over the place? Can you talk to that?
Yeah. So I would say that I work with a lot of like folks who are building heart-centered businesses around sort of their soul's calling. And they're specifically wanting to build businesses that are 100% digital. They want to sell services online as well as online courses and sort of build up expertise in one domain. I usually attract a much more like spiritual community or folks interested in self-development, a lot of like life coaches, money coaches, health coaches, that kind of nature. But it's usually folks who are also transitioning from usually a corporate world and want to really do something creative and heart-centered and what's really in alignment with them, and usually share their lessons and what they've learned through their trials and tribulations and turning that into like a service or a course.
So what does a journey for someone look like? Is it 6 months of working with you and your team? Is it going through an online course that you've prepared? How do you, what is the vehicle and the journey by which you take them from where they are to where they want to be?
Yeah, I offer a variety of like a couple different coaching packages and courses. The sort of the base, my signature course is called Your Conscious Empire, which helps people go from an idea to a full business that's launched in 3 months. And we walk through like all the stages of figuring out your unique genius, validating your idea, turning that, genius into an idea, making sure that there's demand for that. Once there is, moving through building out like websites, services, opt-ins, email lists, social media, all that kind of stuff, launching sales, consult calls, and then moving on to bigger stuff down the road for later past 3 months of like what it looks like to run webinars. If you want how to like launch an online course, essentially a business sort of in a box, and how you build that out in 3 months in a step-by-step way. That's sort of like my main signature offer. But in terms of helping people, most people are usually curious about that initial square one of what's my genius? What can I turn into a business? And that is just a 3-hour call with me of running through my framework called the Genius Framework that I teach in my book, P.S. You're a Genius, helping them figure out what only they can uniquely do, and then turning that into a business model and services and offerings. And I've done it so many times that I can kind of like whip it out pretty quick, but it's like, yeah, it's a 3-hour call with me.
So you just happen to mention this new book that's coming out. So that's the news. So the book is currently on pre-order. This currently on your website. Cool. So give the title again, and then let's talk about what's a little bit about what's in the book.
Yeah. So it's called P.S. You're a Genius, an unconventional guide to finding your innate gifts, even when you feel like you have none. And it is designed as a self-reflective journey to figure out essentially what I would call your genius, AKA what is that thing that's truly world-class that only you can uniquely do? And how can you turn that into a business, a side hustle, a career? It's designed to be, there's sort of 4 main parts of the book. The first is figuring out your gifts, because I really believe if you find your top 3 to 5 gifts, like truly those innate talents that you have, and you put them together and use them all at once, you can create this genius byproduct. But the key thing is to use those talents at once. So I walk you through 10 kind of unconventional questions to figure out what those gifts are in part 1. Then we move into blending them together to figure out your genius and fleshing out next steps to doing your genius in real time, whether that's like starting a business or pivoting in your career. There's tips if you're like still in high school or whatever. With publishing, you want to hit all the demographics. And then I really think the most impactful chapters and parts is part 3 and part 4. So part 3 is kind of going through ditching the doubts that hold you back. So when you find your unique genius and your unique gifts, going through the things like I'm not good enough, or I can't make money doing that, or somebody's already doing it better than me, so I can't, or I need perfect conditions before I start, and kind of working through those mindset blocks that hold us back from being our like most vibrant, bright self. And then the last part 4 is I call it the new playbook for success, because I really believe that when you're doing your genius and you're tapped into that thing, it's almost like you get to play by a different set of rules, because we all know what it looks like when somebody's really in their element or in their flow. It just is like the world opens up to them and magic happens and flow and synchronicities. So it's kind of like these new rules to play by. So I teach the reader how to listen to their intuition and like following those intuitive impulses. I teach a bunch of other unconventional lessons like quitting's underrated, knowing when to quit and walk away, the concept of going for what you want, not what you think you can get, because geniuses don't really limit themselves. They kind of go and play big. I talk about, you can either be the genius or the copycat, but not both. So that's sort of the breakdown of the book, finding your gifts, finding your genius, ditching the doubts that hold you back, and then getting this sort of new playbook for success. So I've tried to make it as valuable and jam-packed with all my knowledge as possible in one book.
So there's so many different directions that we could go.
Yeah.
But let me ask this: is there a favorite mental model or tool that you teach in the book or you share with your clients for people to get past the obstacles that are holding themselves back, such as imposter syndrome? But is there a favorite tool that you like to use?
Yeah, in terms of like the imposter syndrome and like who am I to do this? One of the questions I love the best in terms of finding your genius is to really think about um, what do your idols say about you? Meaning, I always believe that what you admire in others is actually a direct reflection of your own genius. So whenever you feel like there's folks out there that are so good, or you just see people and like that person's just like amazing, I would love to be like them. Using that as a mental reminder that you have that same gift of what you, if you, I always am very cognizant of what words people use, but say if a client is like, I like so and so, this person's an amazing teacher, service creator, online entrepreneur, I'll be like, list 5 things that you love about them. And then they'll list 5 things. And it's usually those 5 things are 5 gifts that they have inside themselves. And I think that can be such a powerful tool of reflection when you are doubting yourself, you feel like you can't do it. Just remembering that your idols exhibit that same capacity for you to do the same. Because I always believe that we're like subconsciously drawn to the folks that have this or a similar genius to us and have those gifts similar to us. And we're always pulled in that direction. So I think that can be really helpful in those moments when you feel uncertain.
Talk to me about your journey of writing the book. What has it been like for you, and how long ago did you start?
All in, that process took a year. So I started pitching. Actually, it was through my quiz being so successful. My quiz called What's Your Genius? I ended up being like, hey, this is popular. I should try. I had actually tried to pitch for a TED Talk and I didn't get it. I was like, well, I have this concept. Let me try pitching for a book. And then I got an agent and got a book deal. But I had to really, once again, I pitched over 200 literary agents and I got over 200 no's before I got somebody that wanted to represent me for my book. So that took time. But once I got the right agent, we got a deal right away. And then I had 4 months to write it. So all of 2020 was just me writing the book. And I really thought through a lot of, what have I learned in my entrepreneurial journey over the years? What have been the most impactful lessons that I've learned from working with clients from all over the world, building out businesses, helping people find their genius? And how could I turn this into something impactful for people to read? And really also listening a lot to how I describe it, almost as like, what message do I need to channel for like the reader that they need to hear? So I really reflected on what were those key pieces I wish I had at the start of my journey, or what's those pieces of advice that have really made the difference in clients' lives that I would like relay to the reader. So I had to do a lot of like self-reflection on those kinds of bits.
Talk to me a little bit about why you went a more traditional route with a book agent instead of self-publishing. What informed that decision?
Yeah, I have done so many mediums already. Like in my business, I have had my podcast for 5 years. I've done membership sites, online courses. Initially, like I had said, I wanted to do like a TED Talk, and I had actually I had tried to publish a book beforehand and it had been rejected. And I was like, I might as well try again. I wanted like just a different medium. And also, I'm a very goal driven person. And if you want to hit the New York Times bestseller list, you have to come from a traditional publishing house. So that, based on that one thing alone, I was like, I want an opportunity to aim for the stars. And if I want that, I need to have a traditional publishing house do it. So yeah. And I had to my other ebook, or I had turned it into an ebook because I had failed to get it published, and that was fine. And that was all good and dandy. But this one, I was like, this is a really special message. And I had that intuitive insight that this was like a body of work that needed to be bigger than what I could just make it. And I wanted to kind of go for the stars with it. So that's one of the classic things. One of the lessons from the book: go for what you want, not what you think you can get. So it ended up working out.
It's really cool. And man, you are the poster child for breaking through rejection. I mean, 200 no's. That's impressive. That might even beat J.K. Rowling's persistence. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
You mentioned a successful quiz, and I know this because you sent over some notes about your business before we got on started recording. Let's pivot a little bit towards quizzes and how you've used that in your business, and some things that you've picked up along the way and things that you've learned that can help other people who might be considering having a quiz.
Yeah, quizzes are such an amazing opt-in because it can build your list so fast. I was kind of always sort of struggling with list building, to be honest, and I had good little opt-ins and little video courses for free, but nothing that was taken off like wildfire. So I decided to kind of make a quiz on the whim. And one of the things I think is really great about quizzes is that like the customer that takes the quiz, they feel so like personally invested in taking the quiz, but they also get personalized results, meaning that when they're getting their results back and they're getting that opt-in, they feel like you've given them something of high value because it's tailored to them versus just a general opt-in that everybody gets. So it's a really great way to start off that relationship with a customer on a really good foot, because they're like, oh, so-and-so is giving me this like amazing result. And it's one of those things where if you pour the love and energy and devotion in to building a good quiz and great result pages, it can just sort of continue to just like live on your site for years. And it's how I've been able to grow my email list and get more eyeballs on my stuff. Because within 2 months of launching my quiz, I had 6,000 new subscribers. And it was just such a great way to like breathe in that fresh life into your email list. And as all entrepreneurs, all of us know that email list is so key in terms of our businesses and building that out. So that's one of the key reasons I love to recommend that for business coaching clients, is that you just get to get a great first start with your leads coming in and your potential clients, giving them personalized results and giving them something special and juicy that they just can't just get anywhere else online. Just like a different, PDF or just another different thing that they could find somewhere else.
So I would guess that the success of that quiz is really going to depend on, just like a book, on sort of the big idea behind it, the hook behind it, and sometimes even the language behind it. Is there anything that I just mentioned that brings up like a major point or a major lesson learned that you share with clients in terms of making their quiz a successful one?
Yeah, I think it's always good when you're thinking title is everything and thinking about the body of work of what's going to go into this quiz. I'm really thinking about what goal does your ideal client want to reach, and putting the name closer towards a goal that they're trying to reach, or helping them get away from a pain point that they're trying to, remove themselves from, and really thinking about your unique customer and really think, what is maybe the thing that I could really deliver somebody an answer for that they've been seeking and yearning for? What special thing could I teach on, or what kind of specific problem would I solve that meets them exactly where they're at right now in their journey? And really thinking about that answer of like, what little tidbit of wisdom could you deliver that would just help somebody kind of go from 0 to 1, or have an aha moment in their thinking, or breakthrough, or teach them the next sort of steps in the results that is really relayed to the work that you do and what you offer as like a service provider or an entrepreneur or a course creator, and thinking about that in terms of the topic that you give your quiz on.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask, can you think of some examples of either, I'm sure you can think of your quiz title, but maybe also one or two other examples from clients where you feel like, okay, that's a really good example of naming your quiz correctly for success.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact name, but I had a client who was a money coach, and it was like, what's the next step in kind of like your next step in building your financial plan? Essentially, she had clients that were already making a significant amount of money and really had wanted to get into like investing or real estate, or like just starting to get that whole financial picture together and budgeting and all that stuff. And it was like, it was really just understanding of like, what's that next step you need to take in your personal finances that you haven't been taking. And she had built out 3 result types of sort of like that beginning step of maybe just getting a budget together and just starting to put that together, or the person that's more advanced and is like, okay, I've got a little bit in place, but how can I maybe start focusing more on retirement? And then it's sort of the third bucket of results of like, I kind of have everything up and running and everything's good, but I need more refinement, or I want to work on this specific goal. And giving the clients and the leads really solid deliverables and tips in those 3 result pages really helped her build her email list, and also make sure that like those leads were being super served in terms of next steps and like tangible tips that they could do in order to get their financial house in order, or get their finances in order, or grow what they wanted to grow, but helping them overall with the overarching goal of, tackling that financial plan that is usually so hard for people. And then being really supportive with the tips that she gave.
So I've seen quizzes that are 26 questions long, and I've seen some that are just 1 question long. Is there a sweet spot that usually you aim for and you steer your clients towards aiming for?
I like to recommend like 8 to 13, just to make sure that people are like enticed enough to go through, but not too long that they drop off and then don't want to give you your email they don't want to give the email at the end. So I like short and sweet, I think is always better.
Okay. Great tip. So I'm going to pivot back to your work with people and helping them find their genius. So it sounds like a lot of people who come to you, they don't know yet what their genius is. And so, because I would have thought that you were, before this call, I would have assumed that most people would come to you and say, okay, this is what I'm good at. Help me package this up into a group coaching class or whatever you think it should be. Help me market it. Help me get it out into the world. But it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're working with people who have either no idea or some idea, but they need some help shaping what their genius is. Is that correct?
Yes, I definitely say so. Usually the folks, when I'm working with them one-on-one, all I ask is that you have a base idea of like what you'd like to build or a couple things. And then I can pretty much build and support the rest from there. But it's usually people who are at that square one of like, it's usually like I've done a lot of personality assessments and strengths tests, but like I'm not entirely sure on what I want to do going forward, or I'm at this sort of point in my life where I want to make a big change, but I need a little bit of that sort of gumption and courage to go for it, and like reassurance that I'm on the right track. Could you just sort of help me in terms of like, is this really what I'm meant to be doing? Or are these the things that I'm really good at? So usually they either know nothing or they know a little bit. But I mean, in terms of like helping people find their genius, it's usually just, I always believe it's kind of like right under the tip of your nose, but sometimes it takes a little bit of just like going through questions to just figure out that it's there.
Yeah, you went exactly where I was going to go next. So I remember you mentioned that in the book you have, I believe it was 10, I think you said unique or surprising questions. Can you give us a taste of one or two of these questions that you put in the book or you use with your private clients to help them find their genius?
Yeah, one of my favorites is always starting off with what's your dream and like what is it that you really want. I always feel like you can tell a lot about somebody's gifts, because I really believe that part of your genius, if you were to live out all your biggest dreams, there's a really good chance you'd be using all of your best gifts. So I always like to start my client calls with like, if you could wave your magic wand and have anything that you wanted, what would you be doing? What would your work look like? How do you look like? How do you think that day would go? What do you see yourself doing? And not putting pressure on yourself to like do all those things, but just think about it and get into that dreaming space. Because usually, I really believe that, your genius is your purpose. And if you really look at those gifts, if you look at the dream that you have, there's a really good chance you can tease out a lot of gifts from there. So I usually start with that question. But in terms of the book, we start with the question around how do your idols reflect your gifts? I think that's always a really concrete one of like thinking about the top 5 people you admire, writing down 5 things you like about each one of them, and then realizing in those 25 traits total that you write down, there's a very good chance there's a lot of gifts in there that you have in yourself. So like thinking about those questions. I'm also a big believer in one of the chapters is what does your bookshelf say about you? So really looking at the books that are on your shelf and what does that say about your unique gifts and what stuff you are good at? Because you are once again always drawn to folks that have similar talents to you and similar gifts as you. So really looking almost as if your bookshelf is holding up a mirror to what you're uniquely good at. And those are like 3 little intro questions that tell me a lot about a person quickly.
One thing that I've noticed over the years is that it seems to me, this might be changing a little bit these days, but it seems to me that the online course building space tends to attract people who lean a little bit more heavily towards the introvert side. And I was wondering for people who, have you worked with clients that you would say, okay, even though you're a little bit introverted, it's like you can still put your genius out into the world. And if so, what are some tips for someone who's a little bit on the introverted side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think it's important to like lean into your authentic personality and not try to change yourself or be a different way, because you'll do so much better if you just show up as who you really are and not try to force yourself into doing something you don't want to do. For my more introverted clients, I mean, firstly, I am like a big extrovert, so I can't personally speak to this. And I'm happy to like be online and show my face and all that kind of stuff. But for my more introverted clients, I always think about like, really, I always tell people, the only right way to build a business is the way that feels good for you, not just what I say or what other people say. So really leaning into what feels intuitively best for you. Some people that looks like writing blog posts versus making podcast content. Or maybe that looks like posting more like quote-based content on Instagram versus something where you're always showing your face, but really thinking about what feels most intuitively correct for you and leading into the things that you're good at, and just leading from that essence in your business versus just trying to do it like how everybody else is doing it.
One of my best friends is a guy named Andre Chaperone, and he, if for anyone who hasn't heard of his name, he is an email copywriting genius. One of his courses, he's rebranding it now, but he originally was best known for autoresponder madness, and so he fits that example that you were talking about perfectly, where he'll write brilliant long form blog posts, he'll write incredible well-researched emails, but it's a challenge to get him. I've gotten him on a few recordings. These weren't even technically podcasts, and I think he's actually stood up and spoken at one event, but I mean, it was super painful for him to do. But he's living proof that even someone who is extremely introverted can set up the rules of the game, however works for him or her. So I 100% agree with you. Glad to hear that. So one of the things I would love to know is how did you find your way into our world, the deadline funnel space? What part of your journey brought you to us?
Yeah, when I had switched over from just sort of doing live launching all the time, I really wanted to get into evergreen webinar marketing for my online courses, and Deadline Funnel came recommended to me, and I was like, oh, this is like game changing. These countdown timers. And that's essentially how I got into Deadline Funnel. That was years ago now. I would say at least 2 or 3 years. But yeah, it started with evergreen webinars. And then I had played around with a bunch of other things, like putting a Tripwire on my quiz to have which ended up doing really well with, Deadline Funnel, powering that countdown. But that's kind of how I started my journey with Deadline Funnel.
So after someone goes through your quiz, you're presenting them with a low price offer. How does it? Can you give some tips? Because what I typically, I want to hear your thoughts, but what I typically tell people is to make sure that the Tripwire offer is a really, really close match to what they're opting in for. Do you want to take it from there and share any other tips that you've found?
Yeah, I would echo the exact same. It should just be like this perfect little next step. So for example, my quiz is, what's your genius? And then because folks are taking the quiz to build a business based on their genius, it's a discounted little ebook quick starter guide on how you build out a digital business based on your genius, offered at a discounted rate for 15 minutes. So it just feels like that easy, it should just feel like an easy yes, and something that's easy no brainer of that absolute perfect little next step at a cheap rate.
So what are your thoughts for someone who says, but I want them to buy this other thing. I don't want them to buy this $7 or $19 or $29 thing and that just completely scratch their itch. I want to deliver value, but at the same time, I want them to continue to go further in this journey with me. Are there any suggestions that you have in terms of how you structure the Tripwire so that it delivers value for what they're getting, but really encourages them to continue further?
Yeah, I definitely understand that feeling. That's kind of how I had felt in the beginning, thinking my best products are my more expensive courses where I pour everything into it. It's the whole A to Z of everything. I feel like I should just only offer this. Yet I've really noticed that it's been a really good warm up and a good intro of say, for example, somebody buys something from me and they're oh, I got a lot of value for $17 from this Kelly Trach girl, and this really helped me. And it usually just gives people that it's just buying something small and making sure that all customers are different. I'm okay jumping into something expensive from somebody that I really know, and trust, but all customers are different. And I found that a lot of folks have come with me along the journey over time, started off with something small where they tested the waters, got to know me, got to make sure that I deliver value for money, which is so important from the eyes of the customer. So it kind of just took a little bit of a mindset shift of just realizing that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and people move at different rates in terms of purchase behavior. And, starting with something to warm them up can really nurture people over time. And, remembering that even if you offer something small, it doesn't mean that people aren't going to buy your big thing later. It just might ease them in slower over time. And it's a little bit more of a natural progression.
One last question. Can you share how it has shifted your business going from just initially launching a product or course to also adding an evergreen into things?
It's shifted a lot in terms of just freeing up my time mostly to focus on some of the bigger projects that I'd say I really wanted to do. I'd say I would almost call it like tier two of my vision and my goals. Like, for example, like I would not have time to write a book and become a published author if I was still doing like endless one-on-one work and also like live launching courses all the time, but shifting stuff, putting it on evergreen, funneling folks to my courses over my one-on-one services. It just frees up my time more than anything. And it lets me kind of live out bigger dreams and other sort of ambitions that I have.
Anything else that you want to share about your? Actually, let's talk about where can people sign up to get your book. Should they go to Amazon and pre-order it, or do you have a special page that you want to direct people to?
Yeah, thank you for asking. At kellytrach.com/books, they can see all the links for Canada, America, and international in terms of all the retailers. It's available wherever books are sold. Because it's on pre-order, there's a special bonus. If folks pre-order, it's a 5-week live group coaching program with me to make sure that once they get the book, that they 100% leave at the end of the month knowing exactly what their genius is and how to take actionable steps from that. And we work through everything together so that everybody's super supported and feels confident. So that's all at kellytrach.com/books.
Good. Okay, so this was fantastic. I really appreciate you joining me today, and thank you for sharing your tips about finding your genius and about creating quizzes and the power of using quizzes for your list building. This has been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, Jack. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.